The Ruby Red Heist by Andrew Carr. 1. He kept his kneeling stance like an Olympic runner behind the carpeted wall, which served as his sanctuary. He knew that he only had one shot at this, and went over the plan once again in his mind. Take the ruby and leave. So simple, yet so treacherous. It was scarily, almost entirely possible that he could slip up and trip an alarm. Then in a moment's flash, the museum's guards would be rushing towards the scene, the combined screams of the alarm and the sirens ringing in the man's ears, and sooner or later the men in blue would be bustin' in, all culminating in the diamond-like glimmer of silver bullet casings and bloodied, bullet-riddled bodies scattered along the floor, with the scent of freshly fired pistols to top it all off. A maelstrom of complete madness, to be certain. But before he took a chance with fate, he closed his eyes in an attempt to calm himself to the best of his abilities as sweat trickled down his face. He visualized a woman whose slim frame was matched with hair as reddish-orange as the fur of a fox, her eyes a stark jade green, and her lips were red. Red. Ruby, red, ruby. Ruby, must get ruby. The man calmed himself with an emotional injection of exhaling and inhaling, reducing the symptoms of his stress, which could include the botchery of the whole crime. Think about Francine. It's for her. For Francine. He silently repeated these words, giving himself strength with the thought of how Francine had a terrible cough starting last December. How the doctors thought it was simply a cold until he brought them pieces of her lung that the poor woman had coughed up one night in her sleep. How the ruby could possibly pay for treatment, and how she would be okay. She would be okay. He knew it. He exhaled smoothly and deeply, and as quietly as a mouse proceeded into the room with the ruby, which tantalizingly shimmered and glared at the man. The man's dance with fate had begun. 2. The tango with Lady Fate started off smoothly, as the robber reached into his rucksack, pulled out night vision goggles from his late-night hunting trips, and began creeping through the room, the ruby gazing back at him with its silent, tempting glare which beckoned him to come closer with its bright flashes of light. The light got in the man's eyes sometimes, but he made sure to keep on his toes, as not to engage the security guards head-on. What also kept him on his toes was the lasers. He went left, laser. He went right, laser. He pulled himself up, laser. He got down, laser. Everywhere he could imagine, there was a bright green laser staring him in the face, stopping him both in his tracks and from getting treatment for his poor wife. Sweat no doubt accompanied him the whole way as he proceeded towards the ruby, but every time he met another laser, he whispered, "Francine, Francine." From the beginning until now, he had pictured how announcing the treatment would work out. He would come into their squalid apartment and hear the hard and painful cough of Francine as he walked into their bedroom. How he would proudly present the hospital money profited from the ruby, how Francine could hardly speak, how tears flowed down both of their faces as they embraced each other, and how she would finally not have to suffer anymore. He dodged and maneuvered his way around more lasers as he got closer to the ruby, its scarlet glare just feet away from him. Another left, another step towards Francine's good health. Another right, another spin with Lady Fate, her moves so stealthy, yet so delicate. Another foot across, another kiss in the park on a bright sunny day, like when they first met at a farmer's market. Another breath of anxiety from the robber, when they had spent their first anniversary twirling at the dance studio Francine worked at, her cute little laugh relaxing him both then and now. Just a little bit closer now, thought the robber. Just a little bit, as he slowly reached the podium and extended his shaking arm for the ruby, standing on the tips of his toes. Droplets of sweat dripped down as he shook from his lack of balance, but he was so close to the ruby, to Francine. Epilogue. His tango with Lady Fate seemed to be over soon, as the robber reached over with all his straining feet could carry, raised the glass lid, put his hand around the ruby, and delicately lifted it by its beautifully chiseled edges. Francine heard a knock at the door, and with a hard cough, she got out of bed to answer. It had been more than a few days since Frank left, and although she knew Frank had days where he wouldn't be home for several hours or even a day and a half sometimes, he had never been out this long. She expected to see her husband, but instead saw a police constable in the doorway. "Hello, ma'am. Are you Francine Grisbeck?" he said. "Yes, Constable Artisan," she said weakly, before having another hard cough. "What's going on?" The officer's eyes darted to the floor. "Your husband was attempting a burglary of a ruby. On the security tapes we heard him keep whispering your name to himself as if to convince himself that he was doing it for you." Francine could hardly speak. "He was leaving when who we suspect is a rival gang arrived. We got a report of gunfire, and when we arrived, he'd been gunned down. I'm so sorry, ma'am." At first, there was nothing, and then tears started streaming down her face. "We suspect that he was doing it for personal gain, and considering that hard cough I heard earlier, he might have done it for medical purposes. So we'll go on what we suspect his last wishes were and give you the medical attention you need. Again, ma'am, I'm so sorry." Francine told the officer okay and thank you in a somber voice, and then quietly closed the door. She then sadly walked back to her bedroom, shut the door, and embraced her pillow, sobbing hard into it. Just then, a young man at the age of 15 entered Francine's room, showing considerable concern. "Mom?" he asked. "Are you okay?" Saying nothing, with tears in her eyes, she embraced her son, weeping loudly.